I'm stoked on this. Yeah, I was like putting in a lot of effort to the PowerPoint, so kind of working on it right up until now. So yeah, cool.
I think Brian's gonna hit the main. Brian, are you gonna hit the main lights?
I'm trying to get this plugged in.
Oh, okay.
Is anyone have a laser pointer?
What?
Do you have a pointer? Okay, no worries.
I'm so excited. I was curious about how you do all this stuff for so long.
Yeah, it's been quite an evolution, honestly. So going back through it and trying to like make it a chronology was quite an interesting process too. So. Yeah, I might just have you guys at one point come up and look at my laptop, this laptop screen for like 2 seconds so you can see what's going on. And we'll live stream my laptop just with the camera. But other than that, it should be all this laptop, so we're good.
I think that should be good. Just once Sam gets out.
Could you narrow the light just a little bit more?
What?
Could you narrow the light just a little bit more? Sorry, it's just like super bright in the periphery.
I can make it more up.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
There we go.
How many people have any experience with animation? Mild?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't used any of like the modern programs or whatever, but I've just like screwed around with it in really simple ways, I guess.
Cool. And you guys said you've both done a little?
Yeah, I've made some animations on like GIMP and stuff.
Oh, GIMP?
Yeah.
Wow. GIMP was like a photo editing software that I used in high school, like
Yeah, I still use it.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Dude, it's free and it's really useful, right?
Yeah.
It's like a free Photoshop, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can make your own scripts and stuff.
Oh, nice. And you're importing your own scripts into it?
Yeah.
Sick. That's super cool. What is it, like Python or?
Yeah, Python.
Python. Nice. I didn't know it did that. That's cool.
Very
Are
customizable.
you going to explain what scripts are and things like this?
Scripts, I mean, it's just like lines of code and things that perform. Maybe you would explain it better than me, but it's just like a script is a piece of code that does a particular task, and you can customize portions of softwares just by like putting, oh, do this, automate this data to go here, or map this parameter to control this range of things in the software. You can code that and then like load it in. I do not code, so don't do that. Or I don't do it. I'm not saying don't. I'm not discouraging it. I'm saying like I don't have that at my disposal, but I have been learning minor amounts of Python just because one of the softwares I use is like, if you use it, you kind of like unlock this whole other tier of stuff that you can do. And it's kind of motivating me to get a little bit into it, but at the end of the day, I'm just trying to make some bleeps and bloops on my computer, you know? So.
I think we're
Ryan's like, yeah.
good.
Okay, we're live?
Yep.
Sweet. Cool. Let me just also start a little quick timer so I can see where we're rolling up to. Nice. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for being here. My name's Matt. I also go by Plexusplay. It's sort of an alias that I've had online for a while now. And Matt hit me up to just talk about, I guess, a lot of the workflow that I do. I'm mostly a jazz musician, but I do a lot of animating nowadays. And I even take like commissions for people to make music videos. And yeah, it's just a useful skill I think a lot of people should have in this day and age if they're into any form of entertainment. But yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what I do all day in my room. So thanks for being here. So the rough like roadmap of what I want to talk about. The music is really critical to a lot of the stuff that I do. So I do want to talk about developing a sort of sonic story.
defining what that is and the tools that I use to do that. So we might even go a little bit into like music theory or the softwares that I work in for the music first and foremost. But after you have the music and you're starting to think about the animating, you really have to think about what you want the viewer to experience or the audience. So we'll talk a little bit about that, some considerations I've had and sort of where my shows have progressed from and where they started. And I definitely also will call out or just like ask for you guys to chime in at certain parts on that too and your opinions. It's always interesting to hear other people's takes. Then I'm going to go over some really bare bones principles of animation. I never majored in it, and I'm like not like on the cutting edge in the sense of being academic with my animations, but talk about some basic principles of animating. Then types of software that I use that a lot of people use in the industry, sort of things that I might have done differently if I started from scratch. We'll get into all those and I'll have some examples, and then I'll show like 1 or 2 videos that show my workflow right now, and then would love any questions that come off of this. That's the quick overview. So, beginning with the Sonic story here. Anyone familiar with the hero's journey? Yeah. So I sort of have a couple different ways of writing music, or this is really just like how you write music, kind of, and I wanted to open this up to other people because many of you are musicians in the room. But the hero's journey is something that's really cool. I mean, some of the best stories told really sort of follow this template where, you're in a zone of comfort, you need somewhere to go, you go there, you search for something, you find it, you bring it back, and your life has changed, usually for the better, ideally, with the stories. But this sort of cyclical thing that happens in everyone's lives is a really common sort of template that a lot of movie creators or animators use when they're trying to tell a story. And I really like it applied to music too, like the story you're trying to tell. Often with songs, you rely on repetition a little more than like a Pixar movie. Like a Pixar movie won't play the beginning and the middle. I really like this because it sort of takes you out of like crazy nerd mode with all the music theory, and it says like, what the hell are we trying to say with this song? And it provides a better perspective on that. So I use that sometimes when I'm composing music. And then this image on the right, this sort of allegory thing, this is actually what I drew up in a Zoom session on the whiteboard with a student of mine once. And he was like, he didn't really know what to write about, so I told him what's been on his mind for the last week. And he talked about how he's a coder, and he likes to do all these like individual explorations of learning new principles in code, but then he has to integrate those with his job and his team and like get coordinated. So he wanted to write something like a song about that. And we sort of broke it into these sections where like the beginning was this orange, uncertain, sort of undefined thing. The blue was him trying to coordinate with his team, and the green was his free-form expression of learning and doing what he wanted at his own time. And we sort of made a roadmap for how the song was going to work based off of that. So I think doing that's like a very top-down approach of like what's the story, and then filling in the gaps with what's the melody, what's the harmony. We did that afterwards, but we started very top-down. These are sort of the 2 most common things when I'm thinking high-level composing music and then going down and making it. Those are 2 ways that I approach it. And one other thing I would say in terms of like crafting a sonic story is I think using a template that is already existing for you to fill in, or giving yourself limitations as a creator is, I think, one of the most underrated things. Like, I'm trying to teach people how to improvise sometimes in lessons, and they just look so stressed out and overwhelmed, and I'm like, play 1 note, that's it. You can only play this note, focus on rhythm, and like the length of your notes. Or you can only play these 2 notes, or this scale, and that's it. And that's all they have access to, and they get way more creative and produce a way more interesting result. So it's to say you can do that at any point in the process, but I think, this little note, decision fatigue is the plague of the modern era, I think is like very relevant. We're just exposed to so much information, so many things we could buy, do, learn. I think trying to reduce the things you're exposed to so that you can get creative within those limitations is something that's super important. Anyone else like want to chime in here? I'll probably talk a little bit more about the songwriting stuff on the next slide, but like, does anyone have any particular approaches when they write a song that they want to like yell out?
No filter.
No filter, yeah.
Just write anything
Totally.
Yeah, as long as you need.
Yeah. There's definitely the like just freeform what comes to mind, write it down, or play something that is relevant to that, and then go back and edit later. Yeah, just like stream of conscious is great for sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were gonna include any of your songs in the lecture, but could you, like, I mean, I know probably a lot of people here haven't heard like all your songs. I probably don't remember them either. But could you take like one of your songs and show how it goes through like the hero's journey template?
Ooh. Yeah, I'll play one of my songs at some point. I'm probably gonna play Too Much Input because that's like the most intense animated thing I've done to date. And in that, I'll talk about what I was going for with that. It's a very like chronological thing too. So we'll get to like an example of a hero's journey style like movie that I've made. But yeah, no one else? That's cool. Yeah, so I think setting limitations is super underrated. I think a lot of people when they're looking at music and they're students of mine, they're kind of intimidated and they don't really know how to get into it. And I'm like, think about it like your life. Like what are you trying to tell as a story? I think a lot of people don't do that. They're like, how do I make the chorus sound really good and how do I make my melody amazing? And it's like, well, if you're making a melody about something, it's just gonna by default tell a better story than if you're just trying to like craft it from logic and like reason. So yeah, DAW, digital audio workstation. I think we're all probably familiar with that in this room, but I use Ableton, Ableton Live. It's a pretty industry standard thing to use. It has the ability to group different tracks. If you're not familiar with these things, I'm gonna kind of breeze through this pretty quickly, but you have two types of tracks in a digital audio workstation, which is where you can craft a song. You have MIDI and you have audio tracks. MIDI is just like data from a keyboard or other type of instrument that can send in MIDI data, but it's more digital information about when the note starts, when it ends, how hard you hit it. It's just that, and then relayed into plugins that can be orchestra instruments or synthesizers like Serum in the bottom right. That's a synth I use for a lot of music production right now. Yeah, so you can control that with MIDI. It's just kind of music data. And then audio tracks, which is tracking this vocal microphone into the software. So those are the two types. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I run a lot of third-party plugins. I don't use a lot of stock things in Ableton. I just like the way third-party things sound better, but they cost money. And then audio effects, these are important concepts when you're learning how to mix and master music, but equalization is if there's really harsh frequencies in a vocal, knowing how to dip them out, but keep the rest of them in. Compression is reducing the dynamic range of your music. So like if a trumpet player plays with a lot of like quiet and airy tone, like you can bring those sounds in his horn out, but if he like suddenly goes like BOW, you can reduce that and hear all of that in a more confined dynamic range. So it's a way to make sound closer to you and more intimate, but it does reduce their impact. So if you want your whole track to like slap, you don't want to over compress it. Dance music, if it's over compressed, has no actual impact, so then people on the dance floor are like not as reactionary to it. So you gotta be careful with compression. These other ones are just about adding color, adding flavor to the sound, giving it a space to play in. And I chose Ableton, like I said, because it's most cross-compatible with other softwares. It's sort of made with nerds in mind to like bridge it with other things. Logic is not as much, Pro Tools is not as much. They're great for other things, they all have their advantages, but Ableton is definitely for cross-pollinating with other things. So I chose that. And it's best for live performance, hence the name. Okay, yeah, I talked a little bit about this like top down, bottom up, but I think you can either take the approach of having a story, having a hero's journey, or you can be like, I'm gonna make a crazy sound on my synthesizer and then I'm gonna make a loop with it and then I'll build from there and like think about what this little loop I made is actually saying to me, or the emotions that it's evoking in me, and you can compose off of that too. Sort of off the top of your head, like you were describing, more just working with the sound hands-on and then going from there rather than thinking about the whole story. So I take both of those approaches. One thing I just wanted to mention is like, I think so many people who study music theory or go to school for it or even just like gig regularly as a musician, harmony, melody, and rhythm are like the most common things that people think to compose with. But I think timbre is like honestly the most underrated. Timbre being the quality of the sound, like a cello versus a piano playing middle C. Those are distinguished by their timbre. And I think nowadays with things like lo-fi or like dubstep, timbre has become such a focal point of those styles of music, to the point where like there's not as much of a discernible melody anymore. It's just like strictly done with timbre. So it was just a thing to say. I think it's super underestimated, and it's becoming more and more of a trend in a lot of music that I consume, that like whether the whole track at the beginning sounds muffled and being played in a car, and then all of a sudden like a door sound effect happens and it sounds really crisp and clean. Like people are trying to create these almost movie-like stories with timbre nowadays. So it's like not as much focused on harmony, melody, and rhythm. Yeah, I don't think I need to spend too much on mixing and mastering things, but this is just talking about managing the balance and loudness of the instruments, doing that in mono before you pan it into different ears, because that can create different effects when you spatialize things. Yeah, I already mentioned this stuff. So at the bottom it says importance of composing templates, like having something that just limits your creativity and says fill this here, fill this here, fill this here. I really do think you need to have an inspiring sample library if you're a music producer. Like, you just can't have lame sounding things to work with, or it just doesn't pique your interest and it sounds lame. I use Splice, which is a really common service. You pay like $8 a month and you can get a lot of different things to get your inspiration going. Along with audio samples, like drum samples, there's also preset samples that you can load into existing plugins that are commonly used. So diversify that. You have to spend time when you're starting just having a collection of stuff that feeds you and sounds good. So yeah, all right, let's look at the viewer's experience real quick. These are things that I've sort of developed more and more as I've performed more and more. Like, I've performed shows where there's like 30 people in the room, and my goal walking into the room was to get people moving for the night. And I do my whole show, and I look up at the end, and people are like, they're like clapping or whatnot, they're like kind of into it, they dig it, but like no one really like participated in the performance. So I had this like realization early on that what I was creating was like quite stimulating and basically just a movie show. You know, it was like people came into the room, it kind of positioned itself a little bit in the fine arts realm. Like, I played it for people and people were like, this needs to be at like museums, like not concert venues. And so it was this big step back for me of like, well, I think I'm producing two types of shows. Like, I'm producing shows that are very presentational on the left, which are just like sit down and enjoy, and then there's participatory shows, which usually invite some degree of invitation or are a little simpler and not too stimulating for the audience, because then they feel like they can be talking to their friend about what's happening or like moving around and dancing. So yeah, seated or standing audience, I think as you go to animate your story, what message and what context and what vibe, so to speak, do you want to set for people is really important to consider. Do you want to captivate their attention and like take them somewhere, provoke reflection or critical thinking about something, or do you want to just like encourage them to move to the music? Two very different styles of shows. So that's one spectrum, probably the most important, I'd say. And nowadays, the second one, whether you want to sort of create this like, yeah, Pixar moment, you know, the opening scene of Up, the movie, where they're like married life and then she passes away. It's like one of the most heart-wrenching things you've ever seen in a movie. Like, do you want that in your audience as they consume this experience, or do you want this sort of like relatable meme thing going where I definitely have a very lighthearted tone a lot of the time when I perform, and I think it's very inviting to an audience, but you know, I have very sincere moments as well in my show. I think it's nice to go like to the extremes on this spectrum, even within a show, but I think it's really important to consider like maybe per song that you do, per video that you make, whether you want it to be this sort of like virally shared thing online that a lot of people can relate to, or whether you want it to be something that's a little more like hitting people in the feels. And that stuff, you just have to come to terms with the fact that it's not going to perform well on like TikTok. That's not what people go to TikTok to do. People don't go to TikTok to like cry and experience an hour-long journey. So it's a balance of both. You gotta hit those people, you gotta make some kind of meme stuff if you want to drive things online. But you also, I want something that's more memorable than a 12-second video as well. So I do both. And the last thing is, a lot of the shows that I've made have been very semantic. They convey tangible things. They have a story to tell. But in the last year, and what I'm doing mostly now, like on my Instagram and with the shows that I'm making, I'm working much more abstract. I'm not doing as much specific storytelling, and I think it's honestly been pretty liberating to explore both sides of this spectrum. Because you invite other people to interpret the music in different ways when you do that, or the video or the message that you have. I think a lot of people really enjoy instrumental music for that reason. Like, they can think about their own life and put themselves into the music, rather than having to just being like sat down and told what the story is. So both things to consider, definitely. There's lots of cross-pollination of these spectrums, obviously. Like, I think semantic is more related to presentational, abstract is usually more related to participatory. Maybe not, but that's something I see, at least in the link with my shows. At the bottom, I have written here, set an intention before deep diving into creating, and consult fresh ears along the way to ensure intention comes through. I've definitely spent like 10 hours working on something, and been like, yeah, this totally does this thing for someone, or like when they watch it, they'll laugh. And I'll show it to my friend, and they're like, yeah, no, that didn't do it for me. But I think it's like really, they'll give you feedback on how it can be better, and I think it's nice to have probably like 5-ish people. I have a few college friends that I went to school with where I'll send them something and just be like, hey, what do you think of this? Or like, what's your gut reaction to this? How does it make you feel? I think it's really nice to consult fresh ears and eyes. This is why people pay other people to mix their music, to master their music, because they're just so tired of listening to it for hours on end. They need someone else to say like, oh, if you want this to be clear, this stuff has to be like totally nixed and gone almost. So yeah, and then the setting an intention thing is really just about, I think so many people get caught somewhere on these spectrums and they don't really commit to one or the other. And I think if you don't commit to one, like if your show, when I was first doing this, I sort of wanted people to be dancing, but they were all standing in a room looking at my show, not moving around. And it's kind of an awkward situation. Like, it's just, like, people don't necessarily know what to do. So I think setting an intention and trying to stay true to one of these things, maybe per song in a show, is like a good place to start, rather than sort of vacillating between them. Does all this make sense? Is that cool? Yeah. All right, let's move on. Okay, a couple key principles of animating. Like I said, I didn't go to school for this, so it's kind of weird to give a talk on it, but yeah. Does everyone know what a keyframe is? No? Okay, cool. So keyframes, in the top right, this is an Adobe Premiere screenshot, but there's, you probably can't read that, but in the top right it says position, and then there's like these little diamond-shaped things below that blue bar. And basically what those say, keyframes are just event values or data in time, where something is going to change from one value to the next. And it could be literally anything. It could be like the texture on this coat is gonna change. It could be the position of this person in the movie. It could be the camera rotating. It can be literally anything, but that is all controlled in animating in a timeline where you set the data points and you place them at the time frames where you want them to happen. That is called keyframe. Squash and stretch is really just, it's kind of like, are you obeying physics with your animation? If you have a ball and it's like doing this, it very much does not look like it's bouncing up and down. If you give it a little more like relevance with gravity, so it speeds up a bit and slows down, you're getting somewhere. But then if you have it squish and then like expand back up, you're actually starting to get a much more realistic animation. So this diagram on the right is supposed to convey that. It's actually like a principle that they do teach in school, to just, mostly for sketch artists, as you go to create this, you're trying to just invite someone and make it realistic. So it's basically just obeying physics with your doodles or with the animating as you do it. Yeah, squash and stretch. Anticipation is another one, really big pillar of animating. And it's more about like, can the viewer predict something that might happen next? This is the bottom diagram, where this guy's gonna jump, and if you just had him doing this, and then all of a sudden he goes upwards, it's like, whoa, pretty hard to anticipate. But if you haven't bent down with his arms, you kind of know that something is gonna come. And I think all of that is relevant to a lot of motion in movies, or even in abstract music videos, kind of the things I'm making now. Some degree of anticipating what's coming next. It's like milliseconds of information. Like in an animation, just that is less than a second, but it makes everything to the perceiver of being able to grasp and like take in what's happening. So anticipation is really important. Staging is a big concept. It's more about the environment that you're in, but it's also really about how you stage the cameras. You're definitely familiar with staging, probably. But yeah, how you position the camera, when it moves, how quickly it moves, if it's focused on an object or if it's not. Those are all very critical things to an experience. And nowadays, it's kind of wild. Like me I do a lot of green screen work where I set up a stationary camera. And even that is like not performing as well as it would probably 2 years ago. Because so many people have this expectation now that the camera is moving and inviting you in a way that you feel like you're moving around the room and like more exploring what's going on in the footage. So staging is really important and can be really powerful. Like it's not even just one camera moving. You can have 8 cameras set up in a virtual environment and you animate keyframes to switch the cameras. So you're just constantly switching around the room, looking at stuff from different angles. Yeah, and then ease in, ease out is just, it's a general like, you don't want motion that just like suddenly stops. If someone's like stopping running, you gotta like slow them down a bit. It's again going back to this like try and be realistic with the physics of what you're animating. Same thing with like, unless you're going for a strobe light rave, you probably want your movie to like fade out at the end and not just be like, it's over. So yeah, that's another principle that's pretty important. Yeah, rendering is a huge thing for a lot of softwares that I used to work in, definitely still now, but how many frames you're gonna output of the animation. You can do it at different rates, like 30 FPS, 60 FPS, they look different, I'll talk about that in a minute. But how bright the lighting is, how the bit depth is basically how much information there is in a given second in the video. So like how many pixels you have and what color format they are. The higher bit depth you have, the bigger the file size, but the better looking your video is. Those are all important things to consider when you render a video out of a software and then you work with it in post. And file formats, anything on Instagram has been compressed super hard to be a super small file size so everyone can get it on their 3G data walking around a parking lot somewhere. So MP4s are the smallest file sizes, but they often look pretty poor. If you blow them up on a screen like this, they'll look really pixelated. But you can get pretty decent results with MP4s. The other thing that most like people who are producing festival visuals, they're working with what are called JPEG or PNG sequences. You can get more color data in them. You can render them at much higher resolutions, and then you do what's called compositing. And JPEG and PNGs, those are image files, right? They're not movie files. So you're basically, when you render these out of the software, you render the number of seconds times how your FPS images. You're rendering out like 1,000 images sometimes. And then in the compositing software, which I'll talk about in a second, you're putting all those images into a sequence and watching them in real time. So different file formats, very different sizes. I mostly work with MP4s with my shows, actually. I'm not like, you know, blown up to like 8K at music festivals right now. So there's no need to be crushing the PNG sequences stuff with massive file formats. Like you need really good solid state hard drives, you need like 4 terabytes of space to manage all the files. It's a lot. So MP4s is where most people start. Cool. Types of animation softwares and what I like to use. These are all categories that I'm gonna talk through kind of quick. And yeah, 3D motion graphics is where I started. Kind of ambitious, really ambitious actually. Real-time and generative softwares are what I'm using now nowadays. Drawing 2D stuff is not an expertise of mine. AI tools is something I want to explore in the future, so a little tease maybe of what could come from me, but I'll talk about it too. And then compositing is a really important part of all of these animating processes that is kind of like the technical final touches or the editing if you're a photographer. Yeah, all that stuff I'll also talk about a little bit, but I mostly want to spend my time on 3D motion graphics and real-time and generative softwares because I'm not a drawing artist. Cool. So, 3D motion graphics. They're the most photorealistic, definitely, and they're most immersive. Like I made this video for the Olympics, and it's just got a lot of detail, it's got realistic flames, the lighting coming off this like Coliseum thing it's just like way cooler than a 2D image that's like moving around a screen. So it's super immersive, but the trick to this, I would say the con is it requires a lot from a computer. You need to have a very powerful computer and a very powerful graphics card to do this kind of work. This video, for example, each frame, each photo that I rendered out per frame took about maybe 10 seconds to render, 10 to 20. And so you're doing that for like, this scene was maybe 15 seconds long, so 15 times 30, you know? It's a lot of frames and about like 8 to 10 hours of just rendering time where you're waiting for a 15-second video to finish. So it's really taxing, and it takes a lot of patience to produce this kind of stuff, but the end result is always amazing, in my opinion. Like, people see this video and they're like, that kicked all your other videos' butt. Oh my god, it was really cool. So there's a payoff, there's a reward for it. But the general thing of like how Pixar and how Marvel do these processes, you have to get the geometry. So like in this video, for example, I got the Colosseum modeled, purchased. It's like $3, super cheap. There's websites where you can find stuff for free too. You animate the geometry, so like, in this case, the flames were a piece of geometry as well that were like coming up out of the torch. So I animated that. 3 is texturing, so I had to put like a white stone texture on everything. I had to put a texture on the flames and the smoke. There's not too much that's actually like a variety of texture. Me and all these little clips of me in this image are a texture, a video texture. You can have a texture that's a video or an image. But you have to do texturing, and then you have to do lighting after that. You have to light the scene. This one was done with a daylight like simulator, and then you have to render the thing. So those 5 stages you have to do for any scene in your movie. And yeah, Marvel and Pixar have 50+ person teams for all these categories. The last Marvel movie that came out had a team of over 3,000 animators. And I'm trying to do this like one-man show. So it takes a lot of time. But yeah, one thing I'll just show is like a little example of a highlight reel that I made for some of my music is this guy. Yeah. So that's like a 30-second promo that I made to send to like booking agents or venues to just be like, here's what I do at my show. And it's pretty captivating because from the beginning you're like entering a space, and then so yeah, to talk down this, like I had the geometry modeled, I planned it out, I made a big neuron, I made a whole network of other neurons around it. I got this door as a image, or sorry, as a model, and then I had my logo at the front as a model. Like all those things were brought in as geometry into the virtual space. I didn't really do too much animating of geometry in that video, if you notice. It was mostly the moving of the camera and then like the textures being the videos on the TV screens that really draw your attention there. There's not, actually the very end where the like logo smacks into the text is like an example of animating the geometry. But most of the animation that happens is within the textures on that. The neurons firing is actually just like a yellow texture moving on the neurons. Yeah, so a lot of the animating is done with the textures there. The lighting, there's actually very little lighting in this scene because most of it is done with the TV screens, and it relies on like just the TV screens providing the lighting. And then the rendering, yeah, there was a bunch of parameters that I set, and I output an MP4 video for this. So yeah, that's an example of like that workflow and how intense it is. But watching that, you're like, holy smokes, it's like really captivating. So yeah, and I will say I started with Cinema 4D, which we'll take a quick look inside right here. But the thing I want to tell you is that if you're interested in this and you're really interested or inspired by this, Blender is a completely free version of the software that I created these in. And it's got even better modern developers like working on it, and it's gonna be around for a while, and it is totally free. Everything you can do it is like, it's insane that is a free resource. So if I were to do it over again, I would probably do Blender, but Cinema's great. And Cinema, Cinema, this is a quick look inside Cinema. So this is a scene in one of the videos I'll show you later. These are all the textures for the objects in the scene. On the bottom, you're applying them to the geometry. it keeps track of the geometry hierarchy. So like that skeleton is probably like a subcategory for all the bones and stuff of like 50 objects, but it's grouped into one little node on there in the top right. Down here is where you're managing like the size of objects or the parameters of things in the scene. But this is like, and then the timeline is just above the textures, the frame count. You have 0 to like roughly 300 in this scene. So you're managing the timeline here, the textures here, you're dragging them onto the geometry, and then you're sort of creating and navigating the scene with everything in the top left. Yeah, that's generally how the softwares are laid out. Most 3D things will look like that if you dive in. So, cool. Too much input. So this was to answer Anastasia's question. She was saying, are you gonna play anything of yours? Yeah, this is basically like the caption I made for this video when I published it was a 3D journey through the oversaturated era of screen time binges and mental health catastrophes in post-rational pandemic 2020. It's kind of a mouthful, but I wanted to make a video that was sort of ironic in that it was like crazy overstimulating, but its message was to not watch the video, basically. So you finish it and you're like, damn, I was bamboozled. That's kind of like the feeling I wanted people to have. But I did want it to feel kind of wholesome and funny and, you know, making jokes. So yeah, this is the biggest undertaking I've done. And it was about 1 to 2 month production process to make this video. Not including the song. The song is probably another month, so like 3 months on a single video. I know people that have spent over a year on a single video, which is kind of crazy, but those are usually much longer videos. And just a quick fun fact here, I have a friend who does really high-end, I don't know if you know this DJ Zed, but he does all the visual animations for Zed at his shows at festivals, and he uses Cinema, which is a software that I use, and I showed him this video. I was like, hey, could I just get any feedback from you? Knowing that it's like super amateur in comparison to what this guy does. But I showed it to him and he was like, dude, you had so many different scenes in this video. Like I work with maybe 2-3 scenes a song per Zed, like professional Zed music videos. And you had over like 20 or 30 different scenes in here. I was just like, this must have taken you forever was my main reaction watching it as an animator. So it was a very long process and I was very interested in the software. I was just starting to learn it. So I was like really wanting to take it on. When I do something, I really try and go all in with it. So I took on the undertaking of making this very long video. But yeah, it combined a lot of different scenes and tried to get across this message that is both like playful and also ironic. So yeah, let's just watch this. I probably won't play the whole thing, but or maybe I will. How am I doing on time? Let me see. Yeah, I think I can play the whole thing. Here we go. It's time to get up and start your day right with your team. It's always best to eat healthy, hydrate, need caffeine. Focus your mind on your breathing slow and see your video. Internet. Let me see if I can stream it at a slightly lower resolution. That'll probably help. Space we look and let go. Quiet, tranquil, info. But as you open your eyes, your mind begins to see all of the interesting updates, like shares, posts, retweets. Suppress the drug of distractions or you'll trigger the trigger. Fake news, it's too tempting, can't refuse. Open my phone and there's too much of it. Concentration, too much of it. Space station, too much of it. reality and find your inner force. This daily cycle repeats, and if you're conscious of your breath, steady progress is the best path. Slowly flush out spin, crap, but I still want that sweet dopamine. We push through my bloodstream, building a cascade. I keep burning cyber cute and fluffy likes and nothing real life fuzzy sponsored and then access hashtags used and just a capricious fast forward inside an endless network steering your mind forward. Network synergy has lots of beauty, saving time and getting booty. But all the figures are abusing so much power over helpless humans. Analytics, algorithms push our brain to us. Kiss and proud, calculating, spying, snooping, thoughts, and all this thing. Who knows? Too much inputs, overloading, stolen by the corporate clothing. Too much inputs keeps imploding. Cut the corner, race the coding. Too much inputs, build exploding. Pull back from all your bandwidth loading. Be my fix of screen time, choking sports, highlights, and ammo loadings. Emojis won't stop corroding. No real moment, online joking. Limits to our brains, encoding as minds need time and space. Reloading, stop scratching your knowledge. Learn by learning how to swim. As I'm getting scratching. It's time to turn on that airplane mode and rip your mind from all the info shoved down your retinas. While online, you gotta stay optimistic and refuse to make your altruistic refuse to stay creative and super. So yeah, that's too much input. Definitely, like I said, the most ambitious undertaking I've done in a video for sure. Nowadays I'm spending, like a lot of the abstract things that I'm making now, I can shoot the video of myself playing it, produce the music for it, or layer me playing on top of the track, edit that and composite it into something abstract in a matter of like 6 hours, as opposed to this video was like 3 months. So there's just massive differences in what you want to undertake as an animator and what story you want to tell, and again, how much of a message you want to convey versus how much of an invitation you kind of want to just let people interpret it in a certain way. So yeah, you have a question, Anastasia?
Yeah, so for the actual graphics, are you just using like Dibiase as like stock graphics, or do you have to draw or create any of them?
Yeah, you mean like the models and stuff? Yeah, all the models, let's see. Most of the models you found I have sourced and then like modified in some way. Like the boss, the monster, the skeleton, the humans down there, like all of these things are models that I did not create from scratch. That would have taken way longer too. But like the vines growing out of the screen there was like a tutorial I did on how to generate that. So like there's certain things where when you really have a particular vision and you want to make it happen, you invest more time. But almost all the models in this video I sourced for free online. So those are all pretty accessible to people. There's websites like CG Trader for like computergraphicstrader.com. Turbo Squid is a really common one in the industry where they just have massive libraries of free things to download. And now, I'll talk about that maybe in a little bit, but there's other tools like Unreal Engine, the gaming engine, which a lot of new games are running on. Epic Games has they have this thing called Quixel's Megascan, which is just like huge files of like nature that you can just totally use as long as you're working with Unreal, their software. They'll let you create whatever they want. So there's lots of textures and models available for you to access if you want to do this stuff. Yeah. I think the thing I was most happy about in this video was when I filmed myself in this kind of general area near Convoy. I found a giant white wall at a warehouse and like filmed myself like fake taking my phone out, and then was able to recreate that whole scene and put the monster into it with the shadow. So I like created a virtual wall, created a virtual floor, created the monster coming up in that virtual space, and then mapped the video that I had of myself outside to that virtual world. And I'm like, that's how they do special effects, basically. So I was able to do that, and I was like, this looks sick. And then I had to like do the rest of the movie. But yeah, so that, yeah, super intensive. But to answer Anastasia's question, a lot of things can be sourced, and then I animated them in ways that make them unique, or you texture them in a way that completely changes the look. Yeah, but it's all pretty accessible. So nowadays, I'm not spending as long on those videos, and I'm doing more real-time stuff. And the softwares that are really common, or I'm anticipating learning more for this, Touch Designer is the one that I've been learning for the last like year and a half, 2 years. It's much more node-based and like kind of nerd-friendly for coders and things like that. I'm not a coder, but it is, the real benefit to these three softwares in comparison to Blender and Cinema 4D, the 3D softwares, these can sometimes do 3D too, like Unreal Engine can be a 3D software, but these ones are really cool and unique, and I recommend pursuing these more than the 3D workflow, which is so taxing, because you're watching the final video as you make it. You're not waiting per frame for the lighting to calculate afterwards and like setting your computer to render overnight, and then you forget to turn something on, or you messed up one keyframe and your whole 8-hour rendering thing is just like screwed, and you have to do it again the next day. That has happened to me many times. So these, you're literally watching the movie as you make it. You're animating and putting in the keyframes, and it just like is the final product as you do it. And then you basically just capture it from the software once it's done. You're like, oh, okay, this looks the way I want. It's looping, it's cool. And then you just say record for the 1 minute that I'm making most of my videos now, and then I hit stop, and that's it. It's done. So that workflow is just infinitely faster than what I was doing before. No render times. It's more hands-on though. Like you do have to do, it's more hands-on, meaning you have to set up things to be interactive in the way that you want. Like for me, it's about getting my music software to talk to these softwares, and you kind of have to do the nitty-gritty to patch that in a different way for each one. But once you've done that nitty-gritty and you have that system built, you can throw in different 3D models into it, you can change the color scheme of it, you can do like things very quickly and get totally different results and just like iterate. So I've been, over the last year and a half, making, every week, I've been making a new visual system that ties Ableton, my music software, to Touch Designer. And the digital community for Touch Designer is very generous. So it reminded me that like, in ways that the music community can be really protective over its stuff, like that's my music, like don't copy it, don't distribute it, whatever. The digital art world is just like, here, I made this thing, here's a tutorial on how to do it, I don't know if it's good, but like, if you like it, it's at this link. And like everyone is super open about things in ways that they're not as much in the sound world. So I've felt kind of compelled to contribute to that world a little bit, and every week that I've been making these, I've sort of been building up to, I've made 51 now, and at the end of the year when I've made 52, I would like to just release them all for like $5, maybe $10. And you can buy this for $10. Touch Designer is free up to 720p. You can just download it, use it on your computer, and render at 720p, which is not horrible, at least for experimenting and making basic content. So yeah, I've been like really into giving back to that community. They've really liked what I've done because I'm more of an expertise as an instrumentalist coming to that digital space. So I stand out in that sense. But yeah, Touch Designer is great, and I've been making these patches that link the softwares and can be easily modified. So if you're interested in that, yeah, definitely talk to me, shoot me a message. I will be dropping that, so to speak, in like a couple months. The other thing that you have to do in the motion software, the 3D software is more so, is in the timeline you have to set beats, because 30 FPS doesn't always work out to be equal with your BPM. So you're always like setting markers for where the beat is and then animating those things with the keyframes to the markers. And in the Touch Designer software, I have the timeline of my music software and the timeline of Touch Designer the same. So I'm now animating my movies in my music software with like the music software data, and it's just controlling the real-time software. So it's like I'm no longer needing to place all the markers and line everything up. It's just like I'm animating in where my song was, and all the time, and tempo changes can be accounted for. If your song slows down, speeds up, captures all of that and just sends it over, which is huge. So when I discovered that, I was like, I'm not doing the workflow that I had before like ever again. Yeah, cool, real time. this is just a little bit of what Touch Designer looks like. Sorry, I didn't give you this image before I started talking about it a lot, but it's a little more intimidating, right? Like that looks kind of horrifying. But the green nodes in this, they manage data. So they manage like the stuff from my music software coming in, like a knob turning. They can generate patterns like a sine wave. The purple, which is what most people use in a lot of the networks, they do images and video files, or they're creating them. And then the green, oh sorry, I already did the green and the purple. The blue is 3D, so it does do some 3D objects on a more simplistic thing. They don't do a lot of lighting calculations. The yellow is materials for the 3D objects, and there's other stuff like DATs, which you can manage tables of data. Like, it's very nerdy. You can source an NDI video link from somewhere on the web, manipulate that. This software is basically built, I was talking to a friend who's in the industry, and he said Touch Designer is basically built to just like take really other powerful softwares and just like make them talk to each other, whether it's sound or visual. So it's really powerful, but it is a little more, the learning curve is a little bit steeper and not as like intuitive to someone who loves just like sketching. If they're not good with tech, Touch Designer will be tricky for them. But if you are kind of a nerd who likes making things that are really custom and enabling you to have really precise control over making audio reactive things, Touch Designer is like unbelievable. And the community for it is very supportive, somewhat small, and like hungry to find new people. So cool. Those are kind of the two major workflows that I use nowadays. And I wanted to just touch on some other things that I'm interested in. But 2D drawing and clip art, that's not me. I just like can't draw to save my life. So I don't spend much time doing that. But like I have a few friends that do it, and they really like this app called Flip-a-Clip. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it's basically just a way that you can draw frame by frame and put things together. The one other thing I wanted to mention with 2D drawing is that like a lot of the vintage 2D drawings are done at 15 frames per second, as opposed to 30, which is like most YouTube videos nowadays, and 60 is like gaming. Touch Designer works at 60. You can make really smooth looking, VR has to work between 60 and 90 for you not to get motion sickness, so it looks most realistic. But yeah, right now most of the world, Instagram, all these platforms, they're sitting at 30 FPS. The old one, let me just play this, kind of mute the audio. The old one is, the old 2D drawings can often be done just as 15 frames. And so you'll get a sense for how this looks, I think, in a second or two. Let me play this, hold on. Oh no, it's playing. There we go. So again, hold on. Okay, so again, on the left is 15, kind of slow, right? It kind of feels like you're watching an old Disney movie. The middle guy, pretty smooth. I think the red guy might also be at 30 because we're streaming on slow internet, but the 60, you'll notice between 30 and 60, it just looks more like it's like in a video game or very smooth motion. I think they're pretty identical, honestly, with this current setup. But 30 FPS and 60 are kind of not super distinguishable to the eye unless you have really drastic, fast-moving stuff, like in games where you're turning your character to look places really quickly. That's when you need 60 FPS to not get motion sickness or glitchiness. But yeah, 15 FPS is a lot of these older sort of like vintage feeling animations are done at 15 or 24. Cool. Yeah, so this is the stuff that everyone's raving about right now, and the stuff that I'm definitely curious to take a deep dive into. Yeah, the AI stuff, it's a huge boom. These two particular softwares are really intriguing to me. DALL-E is hard to get access to. You have to pay a lot of money, or you just have to know people who have the full version of it, but there is a free version of it on Discord, where my friend made these. This is Aaron Lemke, he's in Austin, really cool. He's actually a musician, but he's taken a huge dive into like VR concert production with a company. And he entered like these two keywords, and then it can spit out stuff that looks this good. The lighting is amazing, there's glare on stuff, the metallic surfaces are awesome. This is like such a cool representation of both a brain and an octopus. And this is just Space War film poster, and then it just spits that out. It's pretty insane what's going on out there, and Yeah, I think it's really inspiring to work with these tools. I think they're great, like I said in my bullet points, I think they're great for generating ideas or brainstorming or thinking what you could do. I'm just not the kind of person that's gonna do this and then toss it up as an NFT for like, you know, a bunch of crypto or something. I think it's like not good for society to just like try and profit insanely quick, especially when you have artists spending, and photographers like crafting and spending so much time on similar products, I guess. So yeah, I think there's a lot of ethical questions that are coming up in the industry right now, but tools like this are super cool to check out and just explore. So I'm planning to do a bit of that myself. This was an example of a friend of mine, Jason, who's in India, who I just met through the Touch Designer community. He had this awesome like compilation of birds morphing into ballet dancers, which was done with Disco Diffusion, the other software I was mentioning. And Disco Diffusion I think is free to get access to for the full version. They might have you pay for a few features, but this I think was produced with entirely free stuff. So, excuse me. Yeah, Disco Diffusion is a new one. Hot on the scene, lots of people checking it out. Yeah, and it's just wild. I know people that are taking videos of dancers, like full videos, and then putting textures. It's almost like they cut out the dancer in the video, and then they apply like moving gears or something inside the character that are adapting with something like Disco Diffusion or DALL-E. There's just a lot of possibilities of what you can do with these softwares. So yeah, I'm curious in those. I'm definitely gonna get into them more, but I haven't spent too much time with them yet. Okay, compositing. This is kind of like the essential thing. So I talked about rendering out this 8-hour 3D video or capturing the video from the software that does the real-time stuff where you can watch it as it goes. But once it's captured, you probably took a little bit at the beginning that you didn't need, a little bit at the end you didn't need, or like something got messed up in your 3D render and you might need to go back and do it again, just these 5 frames, and then you need to like put that over the original full thing that you had. Compositing is where you do all this. Or let's say you just want to tile yourself like multiple times in a video. Adobe Premiere is sort of like a standard for this. Final Cut Pro is another one that people use a lot. Adobe After Effects is a little more intense for doing more post-processing and special effects. But these softwares are all just designed to let me take these 3D clips of me playing this Indiana Jones movie and then have the green backdrop on the bottom on the first layer being the Indiana Jones logos in the back. I'm just placing them on top. This is an example of how editing intensive this video was. It was very long because it had a lot of me clips. And nowadays I don't produce as much video content like that because it is just taxing to edit this kind of stuff. But yeah, compositing is really important. You need that if you're doing any sort of video work. You need to have a software where you take the finalized renders from the other softwares and you put them in and you render it out at a compressed format that's friendly to Instagram, and you link the audio properly from like a high quality WAV file of your studio session in Ableton to the graphics. Like you do all of that in the compositing software. So you kind of have to have one if you want to get into it. Yeah, let me see. Cool. I did want to do, let me kind of get to, yeah, let's see. We've got about 6 minutes, and I want to see, hold on. Yeah, I'll just keep going with this. This video is a little on the shorter side. I think it's also like 3 minutes. This is an example that really shows, so this summer my friends threw an Alice in Wonderland themed festival out in the desert. And I decided to like go all out because they gave me sort of more of like a headlining spot on Saturday night for a show that combined visual projections, me playing live with my instrument, which is a vibraphone. And yeah, this was sort of the video that does, it's like a highlight recap of that. So let me make sure this is on. But it sort of ties together everything that I've talked about with you guys, with working within real-time software, composite of everything for the show. It's basically just like my full workflow put together. So here is an example of what I'm doing nowadays.
Hello, my name is Plexusplay, and I bring the vibes and visuals to different music festivals and themed events. This summer, my friends hosted a weekend-long Alice in Wonderland festival, so I decided to go a little further down the rabbit hole and produce a special surprise. let's take a look under the hood of what went into creating this show. First and foremost, the music. It's gotta be infectious to the eardrums. Uplifting to the soul. But disgustingly deep. Hit them with some nostalgia. Then turn it to 11. Bring out the playful inner child. But also their sexy, hot, wild side. At this point, you might as well produce a whole sing-along for everyone. Alice in Wonderland, how do you get to Wonderland? Whatever you choose, be sure it's delicious dance music. Now that we have a set list, I stitched together the songs keeping in mind the energy arc of the set, smooth key signature transitions, and I map out all the BPMs so our visual software will know where the beats are. Okay, it's time for the crazy visuals. Let's take them down the rabbit hole, shall we? I created some quick 2D outline stencils of Alice and a bunny rabbit, then turned them into 3D models using a software called Cinema 4D and did some basic cloning. Next, I brought these models into Touch Designer, a really cool network-based visuals tool. It receives both the note data and the knob data from my music software and lets me map them directly to visual effects. This show ended up combining 12 different visual networks in Touch Designer, all controlled by the same DJ set in Ableton. Now is when you brew a big mug of tea, sit down, and let the creative juices flow. By the time I finished animating this set, I've pretty much learned it by ear and it's ready to go after practicing through a few tricky spots. Then we do the thing! My instrument, called the vibraphone, is really cool because it can pack a punch or soothe and sound heal at the end of a long night. Once I'm at the festival, I spot check a few things in my tent, grab my projector, set up my screen, or plug into the LED wall, and run the show. When I'm not at festivals, I freelance a lot as a jazz musician, so I also love improvising to DJs live or workshops in yoga and mindfulness. I would love nothing more than to bring these vibes and visuals to more festivals and communities, so please tag your fellow event organizers or share with a festival friend you think would dig this. Sending you all good vibes, great visuals, and lots of love, Plexusplay.
So yeah, that kind of like combines. Oh no.
Hello, my name is Plexus.
Hold on.
And
Back to here we go. Yeah, so that's like a full. Oh no, wait. There we go. Full run through of like a workflow that I did for a show over the summer.
Hello, my name is.
There we go. Cool. And I kind of wanted to just finish talking about. Is it worth the investment to do this as a musician? Which is a question that I think a lot of you have. And then sort of talk about any tips on starting, because this was a lot of information and it can be a lot to take in. So, pros. I really like working with other creative people, and it definitely is a quick way of tying you to either help them with music or help them edit stuff. Empower my friends to have proper press kits to send to places and get them gigs. I think it's like a really great gift to give people. So I like that component of it. I got hit up by Bentley Motors and Novartis, a pharmaceutical company like as big as Pfizer making the vaccines and stuff, to do graphic design work. I don't draw, I didn't study it. These are just opportunities that have kind of like, through some connections, presented themselves to me. And this was like a graphic I made for them. They said like they were doing esophageal cancer, so your esophagus is in your throat. They're doing a drug for it, so they wanted something kind of underwater themed, they said, but I made like a somewhat esophagus looking structure and then had like a scuba diver going into it, and that I did in Cinema 4D, the 3D software that we talked about. So yeah, I'm doing kind of corporate stuff, which is cool. Getting music video commissions, and more just like, I really like having creative control over the full end product. If I work like a year on an album, I don't just kind of want to like, it just takes a decent amount of trust, like to have someone else totally visualize your song. And it's not that I don't trust other people to do that, but for me, at least when I was starting, I just didn't have the money to pay people to do it. So I figured, why not learn some degree of that? And now it's kind of a blessing in the sense to say, I can sit down and just for an hour brainstorm, I want to write a song, it's going to have this message, it might have this structure, maybe it'll be in this key, and I might do these kind of fun musical things that I've been checking out recently or been inspired by. Then I sit down and I think about the video. It's like, okay, is it going to take place in how many scenes? Is it going to be abstract? Is it going to be, more dance prone or sitting down and watching a movie? These are all just things that I can think about now, and it's a really fun process. I think everyone would make Pixar movies for a living if they could. But yeah, creative control. Cons. You definitely spend a lot of time at a screen doing this. I really find it to be a relaxing flow state. I think when I work on music, I'm super analytical about everything, and I'm because I have training in that department, I think about it really hard, sometimes too much. And with the visual stuff, it's maybe I'll just do this tutorial today, learn this new technique, and then see what I can do with it. I think I'm not as I don't really have too much of an imposter syndrome in the visual realm, but I just find that it's another thing to take your mind off of how much I teach music and how much I study and listen analytically to music. So it's different, and it's just diversity in being an artist, which is nice. But yeah, it's a lot of time. It's an insane amount of time. If I calculated the amount of time I spent on my project animating, and all that time that could have been spent on music, and then how much money I've made for my project, probably the most depressing calculation I could ever do in my life. But it's just so much fun to do this that I can't even fathom thinking about putting a monetary value on it. So software and hardware costs. Yeah, most of these softwares I talked about, with some of the few exceptions. And just to reiterate for clarity's sake, Blender 3D software, totally free, can do so many cool things. If you're into 3D, check it out. Touch Designer, if you want to make more abstract, sort of less semantic storytelling stuff, and have it be crazy reactive to the music. Also free up to 720p and not super expensive for a full, 4K, 8K plus license. I'd say hardware is where you really need to spend your money. Software, not really. Yeah, hardware is intense, and that's kind of right now, if you're looking for a solid 3D workstation as a laptop or a desktop, you should probably prepare to spend $3,000. Yeah, that's just kind of how it works with the hardware. But I think it's a great investment, honestly, because I've easily paid that money back with all the work I've gotten. It's mildly addictive. That's a con. I'm just really wanting to do it a lot, and people are inviting me to do certain things, and I'm just I think I'd rather be at home working on a video, honestly. So you kind of gotta watch out for that. But I am a very extroverted person, so I would say that it kind of drastically changed who I was as a person to take this deep dive. But I did it when COVID hit. So I was I already have no gigs as a musician. Might as well get another skill. And yeah, it's developed into, I guess, a healthy habit for the most part. Any tips on starting? These are just artist things. Follow your nose. There's so many things you can learn. It's pretty overwhelming. But I think, like I said, limiting yourself to a small number of things, and just really following what inspires you. If you have to do this lecture and hop through these notes for the class that you're in college, just do it, but prioritize it less. Simplicity requires ruthlessness is a quote that I usually cite in that. You have to just be relentless on where you want to spend your time and how much you want to put into things. So set aside regular time to be creative, knowing that only about 10% of it will be released publicly. That's a pretty hard one for a lot of people to stomach. I'm definitely a perfectionist, so that 10% might even be 5 or 2 for me. The actual things I have online for people to view are such a small percentage of the things that I have created. But you need to set aside the time to account for that. And creating is a habitual practice. You gotta break the learning into small, achievable dopamine hits. That's a hilarious way to say that. But yeah, if you look at that movie, if I did not have that movie totally thought out in my mind, the one I showed you, the full 3D one. And if you'd sat down with me and been this is gonna be a 4-month time commitment, I probably would have been I don't want to do that. But when I sat down with my song that I had spent so long on, and I planned it all out in a Google Doc with bullet points, I was then this is gonna happen, and this is gonna happen. And I was yeah, these are just check boxes, and I'll just chip away at it when I have free time. And yeah, that's essential. Developing ideas will be 50% failed experiments. Yeah, you'll do a tutorial and you'll be like, I hate the way this looks, just wasted half an hour building this thing, never gonna use it. Happens all the time. It sucks. But if you account for that in your schedule, you're less pissed about when it goes wrong. So you gotta account for that in the time. Pretty much every day I wake up and feel behind. This presentation was finishing it today. Like, you know, you're kind of like constantly trying to find the next thing that you're inspired by, but then also trying to be like, I need to get work out into the world and not just like dive down these rabbit holes of things to learn. So you're doing both of those things all the time, and you do just feel behind. That's like part of the way it works. But playing a show and celebrating the work that you've done is a very cool feeling. And my favorite part of playing shows is when people come up to me afterwards and they talk about what it made them think about. And what they might do differently, or what they really liked and what they really did not like. I think those are all really valuable things. So, balance screen time, intake, and output. Yeah, one of my favorite things I would just give as a tip is like Instagram. A lot of people don't know this, but they have this feature now where if you tap the Instagram logo when you open the app, you can have like favorites and you can filter your entire feed to just a limited number of accounts. I love that feature. I have friends that I also want to just keep track of, and I can't say that like algorithmically it always feeds me my friends' stuff, but I have the favorites thing is literally just like my closest 20 artistic friends, and I get to just like hit that button and then be like, what have my friends done in the last like 2 weeks, and really stay in touch. Like use Instagram for what it was originally designed, not manipulating your attention, but like staying in touch with people or like seeing what they're up to. So that's something I like to recommend to people. If you want to have a particular account that's just like, this is where I go to see visual art and get inspired by visual art, you can like probably make that your favorites and just have that. Yeah, Pinterest and Instagram are sort of like where a lot of the artsy world is right now. Does anyone else like go to particular websites to get like artistic inspiration? Wow, is it just Instagram and Pinterest? Did I really just cover like everyone in this room? Damn, okay, I guess. I don't know. I was gonna source because I was hoping to get some other options, but do you use Pinterest?
Barely.
Okay, I don't really use it at all. I'm pretty much only Instagram.
I love Pinterest.
Okay, we got a Pinterest here. That's good.
TikTok also.
Dude, TikTok does have some really creative stuff on it. I can't lie about it. But I just can't get with the format. Like the ruthless format it has it's just like, yeah, it's brutal. So I don't use it as much, but the comedy on it is amazing. I find people are hilarious, man. So, yeah. I also mentioned, I sort of alluded to that earlier, but the free and open source tools like Blender and Touch Designer are like great places to start. So, yeah, I think that's kind of it for now. Thanks for listening. This was quite a spiel, and would love to chat with you a little bit more. And one thing I wanted to just talk about, we'll do questions in 1 second, but on Friday, I'm throwing an event. If you're interested in seeing the show, I'm gonna like build a whole, like half of the show is gonna be totally new. And the event's gonna have a lot of cool people, a lot of DJs, tons of vegan food. We got some masseuses hired for the event. There's gonna be a lot of different stuff involved. So if you're interested, come check it out and chat with me. And RSVP and stuff is just at plexusplay.com. So yeah, open it to questions. If anyone has those. Yeah.
So not specifically an animation question. Well, I guess it kind of is, but on the was it too much input?
Yeah.
First of all, that video was really cool.
Thanks.
And second, like noticing how many scenes and all the transitions and just like how like dynamic it was. Like, do you have advice on or like any insight as to like how you mapped that out, or did you kind of just start from one thing and then it just unfolded, or like?
Yeah, in terms of how I mapped out are you asking more specifically the camera motion through the scenes?
No,
or?
I don't mean it in the technical sense as much as just like
the artistic sense.
Yeah, like just I don't know, coming up with the whole trajectory of how that all the animations came together and stuff, and how you moved from one idea to the next.
Sure.
Did you have the whole song written when you animated
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yeah, I produced the song first. That's the way I work right now, because I'm first and foremost a musician before I am an animator. I usually, I had the whole song written, I had the story told in a sense. Actually, I wrote the song totally instrumental before I put any words to it, which was interesting too. Nowadays, if I'm writing a lyrical song, I'll usually start with the melody and what the lyrics are, and then go about producing everything else around it. But in that particular video, I had like a crazy hard-hitting like drop where I was just like, what am I gonna sing on this? And I was like, I'll just like basically rap on one note. It's like what I ended up doing for the more like droppy sections of that song. And then the verses were just like, yeah. I had a friend that said like it kind of feels like Sesame Street at the beginning of the video. It's like telling you all the things you have to do to be like normal and healthy, and then all of a sudden it's like insanely dark. But yeah, I would say I wrote the song first, I put the lyrics to it second, and then once I had the lyrics, I don't think I thought about all the environments I was gonna make, but I definitely was like, I want something to represent this, and ideally it would be this object. I did vividly have the animation of having a monster come out of my phone, like be the first drop. I was like, I want that, and I will like go to whatever lengths it takes to like get the cool footage and make that augmented kind of reality thing happen. Once I got that, I was like, okay, cool, I could like do whatever I want for the rest of the video. But I had like a very particular goal there. Yeah, but the rest of it just came naturally. Like I was looking at the lyrics and then just like making comments in the Google Doc of like what I would like to see as that was unfolding. Yeah. And that's kind of a really fun part of the process, because that's where like, I also will say in hindsight that nowadays when I do that, I do think about how much time it's going to take, versus with this video, I just indulged myself because I was like in COVID and just had time. So I was like, I don't care, I'll just learn whatever I need to learn to make this happen and do it one scene at a time. But yeah, it came as a result from the music, at least for me, and then I sort of bulleted it from the lyrics, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Any other questions? I have a little demo that I didn't really do in the talk, and if you guys want to come up and check it out, it's basically showing how Touch Designer and the real-time software that I'm doing now can be linked to the music software. And if we're still streaming, I guess we could just film this for a second. But yeah, come on up and check this out. So I talked a little bit about Touch Designer over here on the left. And let me see if I can get this better or easier for you to capture. So the visual software is over here. This was the network I was talking about. So you sort of have this network interface, and this is where my music software on the right, Ableton, this is where all the data comes in. And the green boxes are all like, how will this data be routed, or will it be scaled or multiplied by a number? And then they all get mapped to these purple objects in the network, which control the video feed itself. And then this is a color scheme that gets mapped to the objects. So if I play my music software, this timeline is just constantly running because it's a real-time software. So it's just ready to receive everything. And so if I play the timeline in the music software, we can see that these are MIDI notes in the music software. If I turn these off, the MIDI notes down here, just turn them off, no pulsing happens. Turn them back on, we should get a new pulse. So that can be me. If I turn these off, this is linked usually to the bottom note on a MIDI keyboard. So there we go, hitting the MIDI keyboard, getting a new pulse every time.
That's really cool.
Totally real time. Then I normally set this up in the music software where I finish my song and I import the track just as its own finished track. And then this is the track that I animate everything on, the MIDI track. So I set up 8 knobs on an audio effects rack. This knob is doing, let me turn back on the notes real quick, hold on. Yeah, so this, the MIDI notes are doing the resets of the feedback network, and then this knob right here is animated, which I just drew in the music software to do the outlines that are sort of like pulsing every snare drum, right, of the fluids. But then these can also be mapped to your MIDI controller, because in the music software, these are just knobs. So I believe this third one, who wants to, you got it, come on up. Volunteer selected. So if you turn this third knob, I think that's the rotation of the system? Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So that can control how fast it's turning. You want to try one? Here, let's do this one.
This one.
Yeah, try that one. So that's a scaling horizontally. Try the one to the right of it. I think that's vertically. So you could do those maybe even together at the same time and get like a zooming in effect versus a zooming out effect. Those are like just basically controlling, all that. And then one of them, I think, try the first knob. Let me put these back. Who else wants to try? You want to try? You gotta try a knob. That's the whole point of this. Alright. Wait, let me get this rotation fixed. And then this guy. Okay. I think one of these. One of them is supposed to do color. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, the color one does not appear to be working. Oh, wait. Oh, it's because I opened the wrong thing. Wait. There we go. Yeah, so the first knob right here is set to control the color of the system. So you can switch complete gradients to get like a watery effect or just blend between these 3 different color ramps that I set up. So, yeah, that's Touch Designer and the music software linked totally together. So you just you can find tutorials for this or even download people's Patreons. Like this is on a Patreon of one of my good friends in Germany, paid $5, downloaded like 30 of his projects and just sort of like mapped them to the music software. You can generate a lot of stuff pretty quickly. So, yeah, cool. That's a lot of that. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're good with that.